I am calling the meeting, a special meeting of the Willits City Council of September 1st. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a very echoey room. We're all wearing masks. Plus, we don't have really a good sound system here. So I do ask that you do not have any side conversations. If you need to have a side conversation, please step all the way out of the building because even the hallway makes noise in here. So apologize for that, but that's important. So I'm calling the special meeting of the Willits City Council of September 1st to order at about 6:10. And we will, I guess, have a roll call.
Yes, Councilmembers Gonzalez.
Present.
Councilmember Connie's not here yet. Councilmember Stransky.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Trump.
Yes. Okay, and welcome to all of you. I think, is it better if I stand up? Okay, I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking. So we have, tonight is mostly going to be an informational meeting presenting sort of the overview and some of the specific questions coming up about water issues in the city of Willits. We're not dealing with the whole Little Lake Valley or the whole North Coast or North county area, except as it may impact us. So I'm going to have the staff pretty much run through the whole kind of overview of the issues and our water supply, and then we'll open it up at that point for policy discussion. We'll have questions from council members, and then we'll have certainly a good amount of time for public comment. So make note of comments that you may have as we go along with the staff presentations, because I've kind of been asked to let us hear the whole story, the overview, before we break it up with comments. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Brian Bender, our city manager, who will take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Strong. So today, what we're looking to accomplish is, approximately 3 months ago, staff presented an initial overview or summary of the city's water program, infrastructure, our capacity, some of the projects that are on the horizon that would add to our resiliency, and delivering this service to our residents within the city. Knowing what has happened since that session in May, we've been deep in the throes of severe drought. There's been requests by the county to provide potable water to our neighbors along the coast due to the drought conditions, and the inability for either different entities, business corporations, property owners, rural property owners to acquire water. We have seen an uptick, a drastic uptick in our bulk water sales, which is non-potable, and that has been raising some concerns in the community. And the council has asked staff throughout the summer. We've been informing them of the volumes, the activities. We've been monitoring that. Staff has been contacting and communicating with the holders out there, asking what their concerns are. So we were just getting that information and compiling it and just keeping track of it. So we knew that we were going to have a second public forum session or informational session with the city council on this topic, and we think that it's timely now. Like I said, it's been 3 months. We have some additional information regarding our water program. We have implemented some monitoring provisions that help us understand what we're looking at, what the information that we need for further policy decisions or actions by the council-based approaches to take that. So we have on the agenda here, it's basically a lot of these don't blur into one another. We have an overarching presentation. That is, you can grab a copy of the PowerPoint slides that are either on the table back there or on the chairs that you intend to be moved there. We're going to go through that. We'd like to hold off on any questions until we can get towards the end of the overall discussion, because like I said, a lot of these comments or questions that will be posed tonight merge with one another. We can't separate the issue. Like I said, our water infrastructure program is interconnected. One item is changed or altered, it impacts something else. So that's just the nature of our system. So saying that, providing that overview, I believe Rod Wilburn, the engineer, is going to walk us through this presentation.
I'll try to speak loudly as I can. Good evening, Mayor Strong, Honorable Council. So just point of clarification, like you stated, Brian, there are some things in here that overlap between items 1, 3, and 4. Would you like me to just go through the entire presentation now, and then we'll touch on the others later? Okay, great. Okay, so this is very similar to the slideshow we looked at on May 12th at the previous meeting, and we'll just kind of walk through the current situation, the current status, the proposed project, proposed groundwater project, and look at some of the data we've gathered and some of the things that are coming up. Currently, the reservoirs are at 63% of capacity. You see the totals for Morris and Centennial. In comparison to 2013, the last drought conditions, we were 10% lower at 53% at the end of August. So we're in a 10% better situation, about 120 acre feet, give or take. Currently, the Elias well, which is about a mile north of the the sewer plant, is about 1.5 feet below groundwater, or below the ground surface, and that level on August 10th, and the reason I use the August 10th date is because that coincides with the monitoring well for the shallow monitoring well for the park well. So it's dropped a little bit over the last few weeks. The Long 20 test well is currently at 4.9 feet below ground surface, and that's where it was 3 weeks ago. So it's holding steady. On August 10th, we installed a shallow monitoring well by the park well. It's about 150 feet south of the park well, to get an idea how the pumping of the park well was affecting the shallow groundwater. At that time, when it was first installed, the groundwater level was 9 feet below the ground surface. It's currently at 9.5. It's slowly been dropping over the last few weeks, but we've seen no reaction to any pumping of the park well for that shallow groundwater, that shallow monitoring well, which goes down 30 feet. Excuse me, just yesterday we finished the installation of a deep monitoring well right next to the shallow monitoring well, so the concept is to see if there's a noticeable difference for this well that's screened down at 75 to 95 feet, so we're getting a deeper section of groundwater to see if we can see a reaction to the pumping of the park well.
Yes, Sabrina?
Before you move on, I have a question. Maybe you said it, but I couldn't hear it. At the beginning, when you said under the first part that says reservoirs are at 63% of capacity, you did a comparison from 2013, and I was curious why you picked the year 2013.
2013 was the last time we had the last time we were in a drought emergency. It was 2013.
Okay.
So it actually started in 2014, but it was the preceding year that got us in that position. That makes sense. So comparatively, in 2013 we were at 53%, and we didn't get rain until February, and the capacity got very low at that.
So if you're comparing it to 2013 numbers, which were a drought year, what level of drought restrictions were we also at
Can we not get into that much detail because we wanted to kind of get.
Well, if he's going to cover it later, I'm okay, but at some point, if we could revisit that question.
Sure.
Because that's very important to me.
So at that point, I can say for a fact that in August of 2013, there were no restrictions. The restrictions came, I believe the restrictions came later, but I don't know. I'm going to have to confirm that. I take that back. I withdraw that comment. Okay. Trying to keep these in order here. Current groundwater usage for the city. The Elias well is connected to the groundwater treatment plant, but it hasn't been used in almost 2 years. It's under repairs, and it's expected to take about a month to fix the groundwater treatment plant. There's been some delay on getting parts, and it's hard to get people to come work on things right now because everybody's busy. Long 20 test well is the well that's part of the current project. It is not connected to the groundwater system. It doesn't have a pump in it, and it doesn't have any controls or power associated with it. The park well is currently used for irrigation of the rec grove, irrigation of the ball fields, and as part of the truck fill station. The next slide. Go ahead.
Just a quick question for my own clarification. Can you tell me what is the long 20 test well for? It's not hooked up to anything. What do we use that well for?
We don't use it for anything right now. The intent was it was a second well to add to the groundwater system. That was the purpose of it's a continuation of when we described it back in 2017, 2018. It was a continuation of the emergency project to add more capacity, more source capacity for groundwater.
So at some point it may be hooked to the groundwater treatment plant if needed.
That is the scope of the current groundwater project. Yes. The next slide gives you a very small overview of the Elias replacement well, which is the one currently connected, the long 20 test well, and the groundwater treatment plant, as well as the park well just to the south. So like we were just talking about, the scope of the groundwater project, which is currently proposed, is the replacement of 3,600 feet of water main between the Elias replacement well and the enhancement wetlands, connecting the long 20 test well to the system, supplying controls and a pump at the long 20 test well, and installing a 200,000 gallon clear well at the groundwater treatment plant for chlorine contact time and pressure control. I would also point out the initial study that has been revised is scheduled to be recirculated within the week. So there's one small point of clarification needed, and then that document will be completed. As we did a few months ago, we have a little more information. We've added some context here. Looking at the prior years of city usage and also the current usage, you'll see the surface water treatment plant 2019 and 2020 was impacted by COVID restrictions, so there was a decrease, but roughly 800 to 900 acre feet has been the standard annual usage of surface water for the city. The groundwater treatment plant, like I stated earlier, has been offline since 2019. And in 2019, approximately 13 million gallons were used, primarily during flushing of the distribution system. Park well usage has gone up, and it's seen an increase this year. I think the estimate, just looking at prior years, if the trend continues, it will start to fall off in September, October, but it will be more than it has been in years prior. And the revenue, the whole reason the park well was moved, the truck fill station was moved from Franklin over to the park well was to help fund some of the expenses for the parks and recreation facilities. The wastewater treatment plant came up at the last meeting, so I thought it was important to include what we consider water usage, the treated wastewater at the wastewater treatment plant, which is irrigated in fields north of the wastewater treatment plant. That irrigation is regulated by the city's NPDES permit and the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the average daily irrigation quantities between 450 and 500,000 gallons, which for the 5 months of irrigation, which sometimes that is extended based on weather conditions, is approximately 220 acre-feet irrigated annually. Okay, so now we'll just talk a little bit about the storage capacity. Get a quick summary overview.
I'm sorry, just the fields north of the Little Lake Valley, are those city fields? Is that water going to residents outside of city limits? What are those fields?
They're just pastures for, it's all city owned right now, isn't it? Yeah, so it's, I just call it the north end of Little Lake Valley. So it's the field you'll see just north of the wastewater treatment plant, north.
Why do we irrigate them?
I'm pretty sure that's city-owned.
Cattle?
It's irrigation for cattle.
Huh.
John Ford has a contract with the city for 475,000 gallons per day of irrigation for water. So.
Can you explain what a clear well is at the groundwater treatment plant?
Clear well is intended for chlorine contact time so that Scott, I'll ask the water treatment expert. I mean, that's pretty much it so they have, it's a treatment, it's a tank, sorry. It's a tank. It's 200,000 gallon steel storage tank.
Okay.
Water storage, sorry. Storage capacity, yes. So there are a few old studies that we've cited regularly. Cardwell in 1965, Department of Water Resources in 1965, and Farrar in 1986 that estimate the quantity of storage of groundwater in the Little Lake Basin, Little Lake Valley. You'll see the range, the 35 to 50,000 acre feet in the first 100 feet of depth below the surface, and then the other estimate's 91,600 acre feet for down to 200 feet. So, for the purposes of discussion and to kind of give it some context, what we call the first encounter groundwater is that shallow groundwater that is typically influenced by rainwater surface, like right on the surface. It'll be that the aquifer that you get to before you get into the confined aquifers that are below. And I'm kind of fumbling this, but the city's wells primarily draw on the confined aquifer below 60 feet. Not primarily. Every city well has screening below 60 feet. But most of that is in the 100 to 200 foot range. So just by doing some basic math and looking at the difference here in the 1965 numbers, just use the 41,600 acre feet as kind of a gauge, a number. That's the best estimate we have. We haven't heard any other numbers. We haven't heard anybody say that these are inaccurate. And so just for context, we're going to use that on the next sheet, on the next slide here. We'll look at some percentages and evaluate, look at the amount used versus the amount stored. The city of Willits, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just curious, how does DWR or Farrar determine how much water they think is in the aquifer? And second question, why has there been no attempt since 1986 to make a new estimate?
The first one, the answer to the first question, they did rather extensive geologic studies of the basin, and when I see a number like 91,600, I think there's some precision to that. That means they must have put some thought into it to have that level of accuracy for such a large quantity. Those documents are available. We've read through them. They're pretty lengthy, if I remember correctly, but that's the basis of their numbers. Why hasn't anybody studied it since then? I don't think there's been an issue with or concern about the quantity. So I think that's what would compel somebody to try to quantify it. And we're hoping that doesn't happen.
So the fact that there's so much there, and compared to the population size of our valley, it was deemed unnecessary to look further.
That's why it's considered a very low priority basin. Otherwise, if there was a usage versus quantity issue, then it would not be considered at that level by the state. So the surface water storage capacity is 1,300 acre feet. That's combined for the two reservoirs, 662 for Morris and 638 for Centennial, significantly less than the storage capacity of groundwater in the valley. Just to look at this was something that came up in a previous meeting also, to look at the percentage of water used versus as a percentage of the capacity of storage. So the surface water is similar to the groundwater, but we're looking at a percentage of the total storage. Granted, there's some early spring or late spring, early summer where you have water coming in that will continue to fill the reservoirs as it's used. But in a drought condition, that may not actually happen. Right? You may have to be complete pass-through. There may be zero water, and you may only have that 1,300 acre feet to rely on. So percentage use, and you'll see the estimate for this year so far. Things are pretty similar to last year, Scott, I believe, usage-wise for the city. And you look at the groundwater treatment plant production and the park well usage and its percentage of that 41,600 acre feet that I touched on earlier. So
Wait, and just to clarify also, so that the first three numbers there for surface water are the actual acre feet used by the city from the surface water, and then that equals the percent of the capacity of our two reservoirs. Is that right? So in 2020, we used a total of 718 acre feet for the whole year.
Correct.
Okay. And so far this year, we're on track to be similar. It's just that we're early in the year still. Is that right?
Correct.
Can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
I couldn't hear your question.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. I was just clarifying that in the top section there regarding surface water, that those are the acre feet that we, the city, with our water system have actually used in 2019, in 2020, and then in 2021 so far, which is similar given that we still have the rest of the year to go. So we're averaging between 700 and 800 acre feet of the capacity of our surface water reservoirs each year. And that was what these I just wanted to clarify that that's what those percentages are.
well, that is the overview. I don't have anything more, unless there are specific questions.
You did have in here the amount of park well water that has been, the non-potable water that has been used each year. That was on, yeah, I got it. Got it. So I'm going to have questions and clarifications from council members first, and then I'll open it up for, are there any like specific staff people who need to comment, or then we open it up to the public?
If the council has questions, staff is here to address them. And we still want to bring up the topic of supplying water to the coastal communities, if you have county representatives.
Oh, okay, that's probably a good addition. Okay.
Just kind of more informative where the city's perspective is and how we can provide assistance or can't provide assistance at this time. And then we can get an update on the crisis or what they're facing at the county.
Okay.
And how they're managing it, mitigating it.
And so I would also recommend that the council, going first, that we kind of limit it at this point mostly to questions or clarifications, and don't start saying what our vision is for next year or 5 years or whatever, and until we've heard from the public. But I think we could go there if the evening allows enough time. So questions and clarifications. Any questions from the council members? Jerry?
Just a quick question. BGS, can you give me for the purposes of the public and also clarify what that measurement is?
Below ground surface.
Thank you.
Any other council member questions or clarifications? Okay. Do we want to, again, just before we hear from the public, which is coming next, John, do you want to give a quick, if you have a report on the request for coast emergency supply water, what's happening with that?
Are we then moving to two? I think that would be moving us for the next item of business. Should we take questions from the public on number one first, Mel?
Well,
We didn't really give the public an opportunity.
well, we haven't presented what the situation with that is, and we've actually talked about Park Well and the monitoring well.
But you told us not to state our opinion, and we didn't hear from the public about the summary report.
But we will right after John gives us.
Okay, that's going to item 2, but okay.
Okay, well, I think maybe I'm wrong. I think we actually did 1, 3, and 4 already.
Essentially, we did.
Okay, so we're filling in a little information about the coastal community's situation, and then we open it up to...
Okay, staff here or myself can present, Scott as well, we can inform the council and the general public on what our perspective is relating to number 2 on the agenda. But we have the county supervisors in the audience who are much more informed on how the county is coordinating with the city of Kaya and the city of Fort Bragg on this matter. So we're going to hand over the podium to them, and then we can fill in any gaps.
Rest assured, you will get your opportunity. Okay, go ahead, John.
Do I need to use the microphone? Yes? Okay. So thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm John Haschak, 3rd District Supervisor, and with me is Supervisor Glenn McGordy from the 2nd District, 1st District, and he represents Redwood Valley, Potter Valley, Talmadge, Eastern Hills of Ukiah. And together we're on the drought task force that the Board of Supervisors created in April when we declared the state of emergency for our drought situation. That was the day before Governor Newsom came to Lake Mendocino and declared it as part of his state declaration for the upper Russian River Valley flood or district. And we have Howard DeShiel is here, and he is the incident command. He's a director of transportation for the county, but in this situation, he is the incident commander for the drought. So thank you for being here. And so anyway, the drought situation on the coast has been very dire. And it's also, we have situations of wells going dry in the Little Lake Valley, up in Laytonville, Covelo certainly. And, Redwood Valley is in a rationing situation. They have, the Russian River, the water board has curtailed water deliveries to agriculture in the Russian River Basin. There's a real recognition that there's a crisis going on. And in the coastal area, people were getting their water from Fort Bragg. So in Mendocino, Casper, all down the coast, they were buying it from Fort Bragg and shipping it with the local water trucks down the coast, and when their wells would go dry. Okay? On, I think it was August 18th, and I stand to be corrected on that Fort Bragg said that they weren't going to sell any more water to these water delivery trucks. They were just going to use it for what they had, their need in Fort Bragg. So the coastal cities, Mendocino on south, we're in a real bad situation. So we, as part of the drought task force, the board created a water agency, and we have Josh Metz, who, I don't know if Josh is here tonight. No. Anyway, he's the interim water manager, and he's been working with Ukiah, Fort Bragg, Laytonville, Willits, and really getting the information out to everyone to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what our situations are locally for water. Okay. With that in mind, with the situation on the coast, we've looked at where can we get water from the inland areas to the coast. And some of the ideas we've talked about was the skunk train carrying water from Willits over to Fort Bragg and putting it into their water system, and then from there they could carry it down to the coast. There were some problems with that. So what we've done lately is looked at what would be the quickest and most efficient way of doing this. We've had ideas of desalination plants. We've talked about barges carrying water. But it turns out it's taking water from Ukiah and shipping it in trucks, whether they be regular water trucks or wine capacity, carrying trucks, over to Fort Bragg, putting it into their system, and then delivering it to people who in need, the residents and businesses that require water. So we've been working on that. The board, just this week, yesterday in fact, we approved a mutual aid agreement between Fort Bragg and Ukiah. And that's so that we can transfer water from Ukiah to Fort Bragg. And we're looking at including the other cities in the county in this mutual aid agreement down the line, so that if there's a problem on the coast, we can solve it. If there's a problem inland that the inland communities need help with, and the coast has something that we can use, then that's what the mutual aid agreement would come into play. So we're just looking at trying to make sure that we're taking care of everyone in the county, trying to do that as efficiently as possible. And we're looking at transportation, trucking from Ukiah to Fort Bragg, because Ukiah seems to have quite a bit of water that they can spare at this time. And we're looking at, does Willits have the water and the desire to help out in this situation? Certainly, if we were to do the shipping, that shipping from Willits to Fort Bragg is closer. It would be, save in the time that is required, and also the cost for this water to get to the end users. So We've also done an urgency ordinance to let people have storage capacity. So if you want to put in a storage tank of 5,000 gallons or less, you can do that without permitting, and that's throughout the county. And so we're just looking at, what are solutions to this problem for the immediate, next few months until the rains start. But, we're looking at long-term too, because who knows with climate change what's going to happen to our, weather patterns. So with that, we're also looking at Laytonville. Laytonville's offered to provide some water and get that water over to Westport and then ship it down the coast. So, there's some problems with each of these solutions, but we're just here to provide the information and to see if there's interest in participating. Okay. And if Supervisor McGordy has anything to say? Okay.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here this evening and allowing us a chance to talk. So I just wanted to let you know about volume of water, because this is something that everyone's concerned about. So based on our calculations, we figure it's going to take somewhere between about 25 to 50 acre feet to supply the needs of people who are basically south of the city of Fort Bragg to Elk. So it's a pretty modest amount of money, but it's a very expensive amount of water to get there in terms of the trucking costs. So clearly we're going to be very careful and judicious with it because of costs. So we're applying for grants to be reimbursed for the hauling of the water, and it appears that there is a good chance that we could get a grant to cover the cost of hauling residential water. The bigger problem is going to be for any commercial use of water. So we're in kind of a bind here, because when we look at that area between Little River and the town of Mendocino, that represents almost 75% of the transient occupancy taxes that we get in Mendocino County. So we literally don't want to see any of those businesses closed, because we have a vested interest as a county to help to keep them open. And here's the situation. So the next 2 months represent a very big, substantial chunk of the TOT tax that comes in, at least 20% on an annual basis, because September, October are two of the biggest months for visitation to the coast from Mendocino County. So that's why it's so important for us to try to help keep these businesses open. And at our meeting, on the short term, Mendocino County will have to try to basically pay for this. And we're going to make an investment of up to $1 million if necessary to be sure that there's water on the coast. We don't think it's going to cost that much, but certainly we're ready to pay that if we need to. The hope would be that people would pay the regular costs that they do right now for residential, which is about $400 a truckload, and we would have to subsidize the hauling costs in that 100%. And then for the commercial lodging industry and other commercial uses, they would be paying $600 a truckload, and we'd be kind of matching almost dollar for dollar a subsidy from the county to make sure that they have water. So that's our situation. It's not a real happy moment for us. Congratulations to your city for taking the lesson the last time and investing in groundwater sources and improving your water distribution system. And it's high time the coast starts looking at that as well, because they have taken the attitude that they can sort of just keep fixing an old system that isn't really a very good system. Most of the city of, or town of Mendocino are on wells that were hand dug over 100 years ago. They really need an upgrade. And I think after this year, maybe they're going to take it much more serious. So anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you tonight.
Let's see. And we have Howard DeShiel here. So if would you like to say anything, Howard? Or?
I'll just respond to questions if any come up.
Okay. All right, so we're here for any questions, certainly.
I take it that the city council is going to have a call on this,
Certainly.
and what if they choose not to do it?
Then we'll probably use the Ukiah water exclusively, or, Laytonville water.
So, I think the gist of where it stands right now is that we are not being asked to supply any water to the coast because there seems to be less obstacles in the path of trying to do it through Ukiah. And we do not have, at this point, our groundwater system online, so it would be kind of a moot point right now if they did ask us until we have more of a capacity to even consider it. But any request would have to come to the city council before, it wouldn't just be imposed upon us. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, and we'd have to have a mutual aid agreement in place and all that too.
Okay. All right.
So yes, just for a quick summary here, the county staff has been interacting with city staff for the last couple of months. We've been working through, we've been listening, we've been keeping them abreast of where we are with our groundwater production facility. We turned the plant on earlier in the summer and there was some failure. So we had to bring it offline. We cannot respond to any county requests at this moment. We do not have the additional capacity. And we explained to the county that we would never provide any potable water if it jeopardizes our ability to deliver the service to our residents. So they understand that, and that's a clear indication. There is a possibility that, as was explained earlier, our ground production site we will hope to get it online and in a limited capacity later this month. And maybe if they still need this resource from the city, a formal request can come back to the council and the council can act on it. The mutual aid agreement that has been adopted jointly between the county, city of Ukiah, and Fort Bragg, the draft of that will go before the council at your meeting next Wednesday. Yes, it's been put together in this era of drought, but it's also reciprocal on any emergency situation when assistance is required or the opportunity to deliver that assistance to any of the community or the county or special district in the county. So it's not necessarily based on water, but right now that's the focus as we understand.
Okay. All right. Thank you, staff and supervisors, for your giving us all this good background. I think given that the sale of water to the coast seems to be off the table, and if it ever this year comes back onto the table, it will be scheduled for city council. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that, but if you have a comment on that, you're welcome to do that. So most of our comments, I think, I encourage you to particularly address the city's water situation as presented here. And I just want to clarify again that the Long 20 well is considered a potential project for the city to have a second groundwater well for city potable water. It is not yet approved. The initial study is basically an environmental document, and a lot of data will be included in that. That will be available for public review, according to Rod, probably within about a week. And we're going to have a 30-day public review period before that gets scheduled for the city council. So there will be a chance to look at that information, and there definitely will be a public hearing at the city council before any decision is made to move forward on that proposed potential second groundwater well. So with that clarification, I would ask
you to bear with me for just a moment, Matt.
Sure.
I understand where you're coming from, but I just want to point out, we did post an agenda, and there are items on the agenda, and I feel like if people came and they want to speak to any item on the agenda, that
absolutely.
that they should should have the right to speak to any item,
I agree.
even if we're not making a decision tonight.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, good.
totally. I hope I didn't imply otherwise.
Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same
Yeah,
page.
so we're now open for public. In general, we try to limit comments to 3 minutes. That's because there's a lot of you, and we want everybody to have a chance. But I know it's also a number of sort of interwoven issues. I will be a little bit, give a little flexibility on those time limits. And if everybody has had their chance, then we can have a second round if we need to. But I'd like us to try to shoot for 3 minutes. So I think Kathy will give people a warning and we'll let you fudge a little bit. Okay, David Drill. I don't know everybody's name, so please raise your hand. We'll call on you.
Thank you, Willits City Council. Can you hear me? Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. One, or a comment, maybe a comment and question. In terms of the total groundwater capacity of Little Lake Valley, despite this historical work that was done, it seems we know that Willits water is very complex in terms of its constituents. Some of the water has arsenic in it, a lot of arsenic. Some of the water has a lot of boron. Some of the water has a lot of, especially the deep water, and some of the water has a lot of salt. So I think, total volume, I think, is not, and some of the water has manganese. So I think total volume is maybe not a good figure because some of these constituents are extremely difficult to remove with treatment. So it seems appropriate, and since the groundwater basin in Willits appears to be quite complex, it seems prudent for Willits to do a better study of the good quality potable water that Willits could use, as opposed to some of the significant amount of the water that can't be used. I used to work for Frank Rust out there in the valley, and his well was loaded with boron. It would kill all plants, and salt in it for irrigation. The only thing they could use it on was grass. So I think it would be in Willits' interest to do a much better and more recent groundwater study before. And one other item: the park well, I understand, has arsenic in it, and I know you're selling that water to people that are using it for agriculture. And how much arsenic is in the park well, and are the customers of the park well water informed as to the contaminants in that water? Thank you.
Thank you. I see John next, and then those two people after that.
John Almeida, Willits Valley resident. I was here in the last drought, 1977, working for a living. And I saw the troubles that this city went through. We had a great number of good founding fathers that were on this city council, and they went and did something about it, and they built the Centennial Reservoir in the 1980s. Took us out of a great problem that we had. I don't want to see that problem happen again because we're already worried about the groundwater. We haven't been using groundwater in Willits. We've been using surface water in the reservoirs. And when we went to the earlier meetings starting around last December or so, it was long before that. It was in the spring of 2020. We were worried about the city overpumping the aquifer. And now we're hearing that there are neighboring cities on the coast that need water. And that brings a double concern. As far as I'm concerned, I've got a neighbor that's put in 2 wells besides the one he had when he bought the property next to me. And he's lucky to get 2 gallons a minute. So you don't always get a lot of water. But we're all working out of this aquifer. 44 years ago, this drought was the last mega drought we had. where that Lake Mendocino went down to nothing but a creek. And for 44 years, nobody on that coast has done anything to improve their situation. And now they've come to Willits and Ukiah and their neighbors wanting water. When they have the most expensive houses over there, I don't know about you folks, but I can't spend a night at Stafford Inn or Little River Inn because their prices start at $330 a night, and believe it or not, they go all the way almost up to $700 a night. And I can guarantee you, go on their website and look, that 95% of the people in Willits could never afford to go to one of these places. Yet they have done nothing to improve their water situation. Here's some real estate. Look at the prices of the houses on the coast. Now, I had one before, it went up to $4.5 million. I think the highest one on this one is $3.5 million. There's a lot of $1 million houses over there. A lot of people with money in it on the coast, but I don't see nobody wanting to put out. Supervisor Williams the other day, and I've been following this real close, Supervisor Williams the other day is starting to complain about the money, about how much it's going to cost to get the water. When you need water, you don't complain about the money, you go get it. My propane, I fill once a year, went up over $1 a gallon, but I'm not waiting until fall when the price goes up even more. I got it right now. You got to do those kind of things, because if you cow down to the money, Willits is going to be the one supplying the most of the water because we're the closest and the less transportation costs. And I think this burden needs to be equally spread. The other thing is the state will not reimburse for commercial water. These grants that they're applying for the state is going to be for residential water. That means health and human habitat. We should not be selling to commercial people who never planned, who are the richest people on the coast in Mendocino County, who never planned for a better way. The other thing I want to say, they started out with this romancing the train situation. Those tracks have never hauled any heavy weight since the 1980s. So you don't know how they're going to hold up. So that's 150-year-old technology. Now they went to 100-year-old technology in trucks and delivering. They're going to learn a lot about. My father was in a trucking business. I've been in a logging business. They're going to learn a lot of lessons. I'm going to go just for a little bit longer. The best idea, and I talked a few weeks ago to the Drought Ad Hoc Committee, is desalination. I asked, when I heard that they were going to Dianne Feinstein's office to get help, I said, why don't you lobby her to get a portable desalination plant at the old mill site in Fort Bragg? Get the military to bring it in. What I meant by military was fast. What I meant by portable was temporary. That's not their long-term solution. Their long-term solution is sitting out there. They don't need to build another reservoir. Supervisor McGordy talks about we need more reservoirs. They got the biggest reservoir in the world. It's called the Pacific Ocean. And the technology in 2021 is desalination. That's the permanent fix. And we'll all need that help maybe someday, so they need to look into it. Because we don't know with climate change, we may be going through the worst change in history right now. Thank you. I want to give you these papers. You guys can look at them.
You give it to Kathy.
Sure. Only got 5 of them. I'm sorry I didn't grab more. Take a look at the price of the houses on the coast.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tamara Alanis. I live here in the city of Willits. Thank you very much for having this meeting tonight to talk about the water situation going on and all of the emerging issues here in the county and in the Little Lake Valley. First thing I want to do is just reiterate my continued support for the Groundwater Project. I think it would really be important to continue the forward-looking mentality that this council and the councils before you have had in studying the groundwater basin and figuring out how to best enhance our surface water supply. The Groundwater Project and tying in a second well to that Groundwater Project, getting your groundwater treatment plant fixed, those are all good things. We want to diversify our water supply. We want to have a sustainable water supply for Willits, and also, if need be, if this council was to take up an item where we were going to be shipping groundwater out, we would want to have as much information as possible. And part of that comes from doing a groundwater management plan. Some of the questions that Councilperson Connie had asked earlier regarding why do the groundwater basins not necessarily get more study or more information, you know, geologically, time doesn't really change basins much, but constituents in water change, locations and below ground surface distance to water changes. So your groundwater management plan is what's going to give you those tools to have the monitoring in place to start getting a lot of data, figuring out what that data says and how it is best to move forward. So again, thank you very much for the meeting. I support the Groundwater Project, and I hope you will move forward with continuing it after you see your new initial study, which I look forward to seeing, Rod. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Bill Barksdale. I have a few questions. If the rainfall did not begin until February, as in 2013, would we have adequate water to supply the city of Willits with our current supply? I haven't heard any comments about what the recharge rate is on the surface water or the groundwater, and I want to include in that what is the evaporation rate for the surface water, because that should count into the equation for how much water we actually have. And also I want to know, is the city of Willits prepared, before we start shipping water to the coast, to help out the community of Brook Trails if Brook Trails runs out of water, because those folks are part of the Willits community. They're our main customers here. So I think that I haven't heard anybody mention about shipping water to Willits or to Brook Trails if Brook Trails needs water. And I'm not even certain that we have enough water to last ourselves if this drought continues as it did in 2013. And I haven't heard anybody talk about, in the city of Willits, about conservation of water and having a vigorous program encouraging the citizens of Willits who use our water supply to conserve water and use it wisely. I agree with the comments about the coast. I understand that the occupancy tax is important to the county, but I don't know that there are any guest facilities on the coast that have timers, for instance, on their showers. Every time I've thought about, say, a family of 4 staying at a accommodation on the coast and taking 8 and 10 and 15-minute showers, I have to tell you, it's annoying. So I want to see them have some restrictions as well. Thank you.
Staff like to respond to some of those questions? And Tamara or Elias want to answer about Brook Trails. If you're willing to do that, Tamara, and then our staff.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Bill, for bringing up Brook Trails. I feel that as we build a better relationship between Brook Trails and the city of Willits, both with wastewater and water, we really have, I think we've set up a situation where if a mutual aid agreement like what's being talked about countywide was needed, I feel like we would definitely be able to come to some sort of a mutual aid agreement if it came to hauling water or that type of activity. As far as Brook Trails water supply this year, we are in a much better position than we've been in many years past, not just due to the conservation of our residents, but also we had favorable conditions with precipitation. And I just wanted to point out one other thing, which I couldn't agree with you more, Bill, about the emphasis on conservation. I commend the city for beginning the work of establishing and putting in place your water conservation plan. I only water now on the days that I'm supposed to water, and I hope other people are too. Odd and even, feel free to look on the city website to see which day you are, if you're an odd or an even day, and don't water on Mondays. So that's a good start.
Thank you. Rob, would you like to address the other questions that Bill?
Yeah. Can I do it from here?
It's probably better to be amplified.
I will do the best.
And I just want to take this opportunity, just following up on Tamara's comment. One of the actions that the council did take when, after the presentation that you heard during your May session, that a letter went to the county board of supervisors and reminded them the importance of following through on a groundwater management plan. So I just want to say, lay that out there as well.
I was trying to write them down. I thought we would do a response at the end, but that's okay. So for our, in 1986, I believe it was, estimated full recharge of this groundwater in this basin with 75% of average annual rainfall. So and that's off the top of my head, so I'm going. And I believe I looked up the average annual rainfall at that time was about 50 inches per year, so about 37.5 inches was expected to fully recharge this basin. And at that time, I believe the estimate was 2,000 acre feet of groundwater was used for irrigation. But I can check that, Bill, and I could get you that information and get some clarity on that. If it doesn't rain until February, given as hot as it's been, I think we would be definitely in a difficult situation. Having the groundwater treatment plant and having that source capacity would help. But right now, the city only has the city has the ability with the current situation, the way everything's hooked up, to get 330 gallons per minute of treated groundwater, which is about a third, roughly, of what the city needs. It's probably less with conservation measures, we would say. But the city needs more than 330 gallons per minute to function. So if there was anything that compromised the pipe or anything that compromised the surface water storage, the city would have to bring another well online pretty quickly to keep up with demand without severe conservation measures. I don't have evaporation numbers. That is obviously a factor, and that would play in if we were not to get any weather. My best recollection of what happened in the last drought situation, in December of 2012, we got, depending upon where you measured, we got about 20 inches of rain. And then 2013, we got hardly any rain. Right? So we didn't get any significant rain until February of 2014, and even at that time, it was a slow recovery. So my best memory of that is that 2014 was when all the conservation measures were really starting and being enforced.
How much rainfall on average do we need in the winter to fill the reservoirs so that they're, in the spring are pretty much at capacity?
Well, we've been able to fill the reservoirs the last 2 years, and it's been about 26.
21 inches of rain the last 2 rainy seasons.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's been about 50%. We've been able to fill, the reservoir's been able to fill. There's the putting of the boards in at the Centennial Dam and that timing that really is critical to filling up that reservoir. And it's a project that we've discussed of putting in a different system there so that they could be raised and lowered more easily. Because the concern, that April 15th is the day. Yes. April 15th is the day that those boards are supposed to be, are allowed to be put in according to the Division of Safety of Dams. We've Scott has done this for the last however many years, petitioned, asked the board, asked the Division of Dam Safety if they could go in early. They've said yes. Therefore, that allows the reservoirs to fill with the spring runoff. Back to Mr. Drell's question. I believe every truck hauler knows is informed of the constituents in the fact that there is arsenic in the park well, and they're taking it. And was there another question? Did I miss one?
How much arsenic was asked? Do you know what the amount is?
120.
Yeah, 120. Oh, 120.
120?
Parts per billion.
Parts per billion.
Which is very high.
And 10 is the limit for drinking water.
You got my question. Thank you.
Okay. So the only thing that I would bring up, just as a community member since 72, we'll say, is all the people that go to the coast to stay in the hotels and do whatever on the coast, they come through Willits and they buy gas at Safeway and they shop at Safeway and they go to the restaurants here in town and you see them parked up and down Main Street. So that, I don't think that can be overlooked when considering the financial well-being of the coastal communities.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay, and there's some other public
I know,
comments,
but
too. Yeah.
you did
Sure.
have a follow-up.
Sure.
It's on the same topic. I'll save my other questions. The reservoir is currently at 63% of capacity, but my question is, how low can the reservoir go before the quality of the water begins to diminish? Because 63% doesn't mean we can use 63%. I would imagine when it gets to the bottom, we're going to start talking about some pretty muddy water and other issues.
Very good question, and a very good point. Because when we say 1,300 acre feet, that's not all usable storage. I don't know if we have a specific number, but I know in 2013-14, when the reservoirs got super low, the algae blooms and all the organics in there made treatment very difficult, and then we had to come before council many times and explain that we'd gotten another violation for disinfection byproducts because of the chlorination and how that reacts with the organic materials.
So what percentage did we start encountering problems before?
2013. Right now our current acre feet is 822. I've seen it as low as in Morris. It was 279 acre feet, and there was 30 acre feet. It was a puddle centennial.
So do you know what that equates to in terms of percentage if I was to?
Well, that's 25%. Roughly. I mean,
About 25% of capacity? Okay. And then how much capacity, like for example, in the last 30 days, what was our number 30 days ago versus say now? I'm trying to figure out how much capacity we're using for every 30 days so that I can do the math. Like in this month, we're going to get this percentage probably.
So the last update I gave you, we were at 69%, and I think that was on the 13th of August. And here on the 31st, we're down to 63%.
Okay, so about 6% for 2 weeks, did you say?
Yes, and we had
So 12% per month?
we had a pretty significant, couple significant leaks, so that probably increased it. I was tracking 4% every 15 to 20 days.
So at that rate, by December 1st, we would be down to 27%.
So you got to factor in, July is the highest month of the year that we use water.
Okay.
So September starts going a little down, October, and obviously November, December, you're down to 13 million gallons a month through the community. So it slows down. It's not the 28 to 30 million that July produces.
And Scott, help me out here as well. Over that period of 2013 to 2014, when you were at the lowest point, right before the rains appeared, the reservoirs had a minimum 100-day capacity at that usage rate, right?
I believe it was either 90 or 100, Rod. Is that correct?
I think it was 100.
But we were also at stage 5,
Okay.
the highest in conservation method at that time.
And we're currently in stage 1.
We're in stage 1, voluntary 20% reduction.
And that is why I asked that question, because if we stay on track and we had no further conservation and we didn't have rain till December 1st, we're going to see that our reservoir is going to be somewhere between 27 and 35%. That in itself is concerning because, there's
Yeah. So again, your percentages are going to shrink down as
right.
the
That's why I
weather-
said as high as 35%. I did a little bit of variable math over here.
the people that are watering their lawns, the gardening, all that stuff's going to diminish. And you'll see the usage drop tremendously.
So I would like, if it's not too much trouble for the staff, to give us a couple of different years' worth of sort of comparison of the reservoir levels and how, just sort of to compare what a typical year or several typical or atypical years have been, including the drought years, to compare, sort of following up with what Sabrina was saying. I think it would help us and the public.
Scott has those numbers dancing around his head every day.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I think also I'm hearing Sabrina's concern, and I share it, to maybe we want to move beyond voluntary stage 1 and move towards more conservation as the year progresses. We do not know what's going to happen with the weather. So I know that there were at least another hand or two out there that we hadn't heard from yet.
I have a follow-up question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Greta has it.
If the council does decide to take it to the next level of rationing or restrictions, basically that's going to require council action through a resolution.
Yes.
The first stage was implemented through a staff action.
Okay, and Greta had a follow-up.
Rod, you were answering questions from the public, and Mr. Drell did ask if it would be worth the city considering further exploration of the groundwater basin. His comment was the quantity may not be the most significant metric, right? If we're concerned about the materials that are actually present in the water, saying we have 41,006 available may not be totally accurate. Can you speak to that at all?
That's accurate. That's true. It's not all usable, right? What percentage isn't? I wouldn't venture a guess on that. We've typically found that with the two wells, the Elias replacement well and the Long 20 test well, that the best water that we've found is between 100 and 200 feet, or 100 and 180, roughly, and the capacity is significant. We can treat for arsenic. We do treat for iron. We do treat for manganese. Technology is advancing all the time. It's just what's the cost, right? What does it cost to treat it? And I'll go back to the fundamentally, groundwater is cheaper to treat than surface water. So you'll look at that small plant over there that doesn't take as much energy, doesn't use as many chemicals, and can produce, what's the max for the groundwater plant?
1,200.
What's that?
The total, what's our max that we can, maybe we don't know that quite yet. The treatment capacity of the current.
It was 700 per skid.
There's 2 skids.
2 skids, 14.
1,400 gallons per minute can be treated at that groundwater treatment plant, assuming pressures and everything works. Right now, the surface water treatment plant treats roughly, what's the average?
Right now, 900 to 1.1 million gallons a day.
So what's that in gallons per minute?
850-ish,
850, 800, yeah,
8 to 900 gallons per minute. So that's what we would try to offset.
So you could match the treatment of the surface water with the groundwater treatment plant as it sits right now, as long as you can get enough water there. It was designed to treat arsenic. It was designed to treat a mix of the Park well and the Elias replacement well, but the Park well was never hooked up for the reasons like, one, we didn't necessarily need it at the time because it started to rain and the reservoir started to fill. Two, it wasn't necessary once we got it online, so we didn't see the need to mix it and hook it up at all. So the West Yost study in 2006 recommended that the city get three wells online to support the city in future growth. We haven't seen the growth that was expected in the West Yost study, and we would have probably equal capacity with the Elias replacement well and the Long 20 test well, just those two wells, as they were predicting for 3 wells back in 2006, if that makes sense. So the other question, is it worth gathering more information about what's happening underground? Absolutely. And that's the purpose of the groundwater management plan, that to monitor, to gain knowledge, to be able to make better and more informed decisions in the future, because we're gathering data all the time. And that would require coordination and cooperation with the county residents, because the city has a small portion of the valley, or a portion of the valley, I would say, but we would be wanting to get more information outside the city limits from wells and whatever we could come up with. So.
I hope you're, I appreciate your patience, because I think this is a very rich topic that we're talking about, and having the technical data and having your questions. So I know it's taking a while, but thank you for hanging in there.
And we stay awake. That's good. My name's Fred Branson. I live up on the hill. So I'm going to want to talk to you for a second. We get done. On the water storage capacity summary, I noticed at Cardwell, and you brought this up, Cardwell was done 10 to 100 feet below ground surface. For our 21 years later, already a third loss on that number. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, but it looks like about 30% difference between the Cardwell and Farrar. And there hasn't been another study done since then. I believe that's what you said. Going over to the prior city water usage around the groundwater, the Park wells, that's the one I'm concerned with. Well, not concerned. I have a question about it. 2019, 3.4 acre feet, 1.1 million gallons. 2020 up to 8.2, 25 acre feet, which is the number that Supervisor Haschak gave, that we're looking at moving out if we do the mutual aid. 25 acre feet, 8.2 million gallons. 2021, we're up to 8.6 million gallons to date, 26.5, and that to date number is interesting. If you look at the number, that's about 23,000 gallons a day, 46 trucks roughly, 500-gallon trucks moving on the roads around here. And I do live up the hill, and I watch these trucks go by my house all the time. So Willits water is going up there. I believe the point that was made is the water isn't really good for growing much. I believe there was one crop he said it's really good for. All these are going up. Then the point that was made here about two wells going in next to him. What is the tracking that's being done for all these ancillary wells going in the valley and up the hill? Because that's also going to impact this. And if there's no way to know what our storage is right now, if there's no way to know who's pumping how fast, and we know that there are some crops that are very dependent on water, where are we at right now to even look at the mutual aid agreement? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rosamond Crowder. Can you hear me, or should I pick it up? Thank you. I live south of town, up high, and some of the things that are going through my head, I'd like to warn against thinking of groundwater as a giant reservoir.
Can you hold it a little closer?
Okay, is that better? There we go. I would like to warn against thinking of the groundwater as this giant reservoir, because what can happen is when the water table drops, for one, it takes water out of the streams, and for two, it can collapse the aquifer. And the Outlet Creek Basin assessment was really shocking to me. There was a gauge at Outlet Creek, at the mouth of Outlet Creek, which is about 9 miles up the Covelo Road, 162. And for, I think it was 5 decades, it was very consistent, something like 318,000 acre feet per year going through that gauge. And in the 90s, that dropped precipitously to 181,000 acre feet per year. And I was just shocked, where did all that water go? What happened? There's no way Willits could have taken that water, or even all the people living in the hills doing agriculture. That was a huge, huge amount of water. And it wasn't until the drought of 2014 when a person from Sacramento came and was asking people here in Willits, while they were considering helping Willits out, how our conservation was, that kind of question, and I asked about that. And she said, oh, well, Outlet Creek became a losing stream. And what that means is that instead of water from the hills going into the creek and filling up a creek as it goes down, the water goes out of the creek into the groundwater. And when that happens, what means is the water table has dropped. And I know there's there's some information here about the water table dropping, but that's why streams get dry, is because the water table has dropped below the bottom of the stream level. And so you can imagine what that does to everything in the stream. Fish, amphibians, everything, all the insects, everything. And so it's really important that we keep the groundwater level high for as long as possible, and we don't think of the whole groundwater capacity as a giant reservoir, and that we work on a budget. And that's something I would really like to see, is taking the evaporation numbers, the rainfall numbers, and the other, there's a lot of ways to figure a water budget, and that way you're not eating the principal. When you eat the principal, the aquifer can collapse, and then the ground can't hold that water anymore. That's what happened to the San Joaquin Valley. And the San Joaquin Valley dropped 30 feet. And I don't know that anybody is measuring if, well, the Little Lake Valley is dropping. We know that in the 90s is when the amount of water coming out of Outlet Creek dropped precipitously, and it was 89 that Centennial Reservoir came online. And I know that the first few years when Centennial was online, there were no bypass flows. That wasn't being tracked, and it wasn't happening. And so it was more impact than maybe there is now. But so I really would encourage a groundwater study to include a budget, and that Willits try to keep within that budget. And I'm talking also about building new housing, having more carrying capacity. There is a carrying capacity in any of our communities, and when we get the amount of water that falls kind of dictates what that carrying capacity is, and that we can't think in terms of growth ad infinitum. So those are my concerns, and thank you for listening and having this meeting.
Any other public folks who'd like to comment? I certainly have appreciated all of your very cogent comments and questions, and I think we're learning a lot tonight. Does staff have any other? I guess I also wanted to mention, yes, Ellen.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Ellen Drell, and I have a lot of questions, but one I want to ask before the meeting is over, and that's, are there still, during a drought emergency, are there still bypass flows coming out of Morris Reservoir, and how do they compare to normal years, and what's happening with those bypass flows? I know Davis Creek is pretty darn dry, so I don't know if at some point the emergency gets so severe that the city is no longer required to have the bypass flows. So if someone can answer that question, I'd be interested to know. Thank you.
Scott or Rod?
Yeah, so currently we are we're required to release 0.1 cubic feet per second during a drought year from May to October. We're releasing 0.2 at this time. Obviously, it's mainly going subterranean. So we are following our releases. It's just lower this year because it's considered a drought year, as declared in Vixia County.
I would also just like to make sure that anybody who wants to be notified when any water-related issues come to the city council agenda, or if you want to get notice of this initial draft that is going to be out for public review within a week or two at the most, do they contact Kathy or do they contact Andrea? What's the best way to get on a list to be notified?
Probably Andrea at this time. We'll work out the logistics as we get a little closer to rolling it out.
Okay, and I'm sure that will be on the city's website, but Andrea's email would be atrincado, so ATRINCADO, at cityofwillits.org. And I think she's keeping a list of people that are interested in being notified of any water system, city water system hearings that might be coming up. So, thank you. Are we done?
We are?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think so.
Oh no, we have discussion. I'm sorry. We've heard from the public. We have discussion. Okay, let's have discussion.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. I've got questions too, but.
Sure. Okay, I have a couple of follow-up questions. Elias, well, what's the arsenic ppm?
0.
Zero, no, okay, just wanted to confirm. And then, let's see. I had a follow-up question for Supervisor McGordy. Thanks for coming and giving us some information. You had mentioned that you were hoping to use some matching potential state or federal dollars, I'm not sure which, for residential. And then with commercial, if I heard you correctly, I thought I heard you say that the county was going to subsidize the commercial portion. And if I did hear you correctly, where would those funds be coming from? Unfortunately, I didn't get to attend your meeting. Are they coming from the transient occupancy tax? Okay, and if so, I think that would put some people's mind at ease that that's where it's coming from. Is it coming from anywhere else? Or is that where the pot of money that will be used for those matching funds?
This is still being worked out by the financial team. So on the short term, we have a pool of money that is used for contingencies, and I'm not quite sure how that's all funded. But as we collect transient occupancy taxes, those monies will be used then to pay for the portion of the subsidy for the lodging establishments. I also just want to make another comment too, is that it's not just wealthy people receiving this water, it's working people in the community of between Fort Bragg and Mendocino. So it's a whole community we're trying to help keep in place, which, like everybody, suffered through COVID. So we're trying to keep everyone employed and off of unemployment, and bridge the gap and extend our hand as neighbors, as our community often has for other disasters, which are much more visible and happen faster, like a fire or an earthquake. But this is a slow creeping disaster.
Well, if I was in your position and I was representing constituents in that area, I would certainly be advocating and looking for a plan. So I definitely don't fault you there. I just want to make sure that I and others have an opportunity to hear the facts of the plan. Because sometimes we get information secondhand. So I thought since I had you here, it would be a good opportunity to understand.
Thank you. Well, that's why Supervisor Hashtag and I are here this evening, is to try to keep it clear. And in terms of trucking, if people are wondering what is this going to look like, so depending upon the size of the vehicles that we use, it's somewhere between 10 to 20 truckloads a day, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But in a normal work day, say at the the Mendocino Redwood Company, they probably have 50 to 60 trucks come in delivering logs, just so you can kind of get a perspective. And about 20 of those loads will have come over Highway 20 from the coastal area to the town of Willits. So it is a lot of trucks, but it's not as massive as some people imagine.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is for council. I know that on this agenda, the last item of business is policy discussion. And I thought that when it said policy discussion, we might be talking about, what might be our policy in regards to a request from the county, or there's been lots of conversation in the community about the park well. And I thought maybe we would be having a conversation about, is there any policy changes that we might be wanting to make in regards to the park well? I have some policy concerns myself, and we can go into those, or however the council wants, but there are a couple things that I would like to touch on if we're going to discuss that policy.
I apologize for forgetting this part of the agenda. I have excuses, but they don't count. So I really appreciate bringing this back. And so the floor is open for other, Greta?
Supervisor McGordy, you just mentioned that it would be a fair number of trucks on the highway transporting the water. Earlier, you also mentioned that this coming period, this fall, September, October, is a heavy season for tourists staying over in hotels on the coast. Is the county prepared to put any resources towards traffic enforcement on Highway 20 to make sure that that additional flow of traffic, when you have tourists coming and water trucks moving, that everybody will stay safe?
That's probably a question for the highway patrol, since they're the ones responsible for public safety. I don't think it's something that's really noticeable outside of our usual traffic we'd expect on the weekends and such. It is high season. Traffic peaks at that time, and I don't know exactly how many trips a day that is. I've never seen the numbers, but typically that is the busiest time of the year, even in a normal year for tourism. We're experiencing a lot of extra visitors this year because of the fact that traveling by air is so difficult to other places that a lot of people are staying home and just driving where they can. But living in Willits, you probably see it and sense it more because Highway 20 and 101 meet here as a junction. You probably would notice it more than most people, but that hasn't been something mentioned. Certainly it's something I can pass along to the sheriff and just ask the question, and maybe we can report back to this Willits City Council what his opinion is.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. I think everyone in the valley hears the sirens when there's an accident on Highway 20, so knowing that there'd be some thought to that if we have that level of increased traffic, I think would be helpful.
Sure, and I've been trapped in those traffic jams before, so I have a really good understanding of what they look like.
Can I ask Supervisor McGordy a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Supervisor, is there any thought of some sort of building moratorium right now on the coast? It seems like if their system is stressed, should the county be looking at a temporary moratorium of some sort? If this is an emergency, then I'm just wondering if that's being considered.
It has not come up, but I'm sure that it's being thought about. The thing about water hookups, and of course, in the unincorporated areas, is that they're dependent on wells. They do have to do hydrological studies. They do have to guarantee that they can meet a minimum amount of water flow. But as far as the city of Fort Bragg goes, I'm not sure if that's come up with their planning process yet. It probably should. Desalination was mentioned by one of our speakers, and the city of Fort Bragg is putting in a small portable desalination plant which will guarantee their water security of about 300 gallons per minute. They aren't taking it from the ocean, they're taking it from the Noyo River where it's brackish, so the salinity level is only a fraction of what the ocean is, but they're able to, they should have adequate water for.
Well, I figured the city would deal with their growth or their issues there. I was just wondering if the county had thought, that's what you can control.
We have nothing as far as I know, unless Supervisor Haschak has other information other than our normal requirements at this time.
Thank you. One of the things we're looking at is putting a moratorium on well drilling, because that's of real concern throughout these valleys. And so, I don't know if there's that much construction going on the coast right now, but we're certainly hearing stories about people drilling more and more wells. And so what can we do about that in this state of emergency that we're in? And we're in the task force is looking at those issues. And tomorrow we have a task force meeting that's open to the public on Zoom. It's at 4 o'clock. You can get to it through mendocinocounty.org. So.
Any follow-up on Sabrina's question about the park well increased usage that's happening there? I want to just mention that I don't know how adequate the information about the constituents in that water has been communicated to the end users. And so the trucks are they're all supposed to be licensed, and I guess they're supposed to be informed that, obviously they're informed that it's not potable water, but do they know that it has arsenic? Do all the people that the trucks are delivering to know that? And that includes, obviously that water can be used for things like construction, dust control, making concrete, and stock supplies of water for animals, which might be affected by the arsenic. And it could be used, obviously, for growing things. And that could be affecting plants that are grown with that water. I wonder, that's one concern that I have about it, and if it was really a lot of public information about that, that might reduce the number of trucks and the amount of water that is increasing pretty dramatically right now. So I guess I would like comments about that. I'm not very comfortable with the fact that we've gone up a huge amount of water coming out of that well over the past, like this year more than last year, and last year way more than the previous year. It just seems like it's exponential growth.
Yeah, so just so you know, we cut off all old water hauling applications for someone that's just gonna haul water. All we're allowing is temporary construction, and we've done that since January of 2020. So it's the same original people that applied that are still hauling. So there's no new addition to bulk water hauling, it's just for construction purposes or agricultural or livestock charge.
How are you enforcing that?
Because I don't sign anybody else up new unless they let me know that where their construction project is or where the cattle range. And some of them are just coming in for town for a PG&E job that needs fire water, you know. Or there's a gentleman I just talked to today that's going to be doing paving work on the ridge, and he needs water. So it's like 2 or 3 days. So a lot of those are coming in too.
So how do you account for this exponential growth and how much water is being pumped there?
How do I?
I'd say last year it was primarily related to the fires that was the general consensus. I'm sure it was a mixed use, but people I've talked to said it goes to construction jobs around the area.
We can't hear.
Sorry. This year, I mean, it's the drought conditions, and everybody is in need of water for a wide variety of reasons, so that would naturally be what we would attribute the uptick to. Everything's drying up, springs are drying up, creeks are drying up. I keep hearing that some wells are drying up, but I don't know of any specifics, so. I don't know that's a good answer to that.
I think I'd like to give my opinion on the matter, and it is opinion, of course. I don't think that it is any coincidence that cannabis cultivation has increased at a rapid pace. All one has to do is take a drive through the Little Lake Valley and see that for themselves. And then we look at the Parkwell and the numbers, and if the Parkwell numbers had stayed anywhere near 2019 or even 2020, maybe it wouldn't raise such an eyebrow. But when we look at 2021 and we see how exponentially, how much more water is going out, and then I see firsthand, I'm at the ball fields probably 2 to 4 hours every day, and I see 1 to 4 trucks there at any given time. There's always trucks there. So when I heard a quote based on how much water usage we're using per day that we're hauling, I believe I heard a number that we're hauling, we're seeing 25 to 40 trucks per day. And I heard Council Member Connie express concern about road conditions and how many trucks are hauling on the county's roads. And I'm thinking about the number of trucks that are coming from our own Parkwell, and I've heard from people in the community about these trucks leaving and they're going on roads and they're crossing bridges in our community that may not be set up to haul these heavy weights. I did have some discussion with city manager about water distribution in terms of how a truck hauls it and stuff like that, which I very much appreciated. But we are selling a high volume amount of water, and I'm concerned about the deterioration of our roads. I'm concerned about how we are, in my opinion, contributing to crime outside our areas by not properly controlling where our water is distributed. In my opinion, we're kind of turning a blind eye, and that really concerns me. I'm concerned about the safety of the area where the water distribution is happening. My car is covered with mud because in that space out there, parents used to be able to park safely, get their kids out of the car, go to the ballpark. We had some terrible ruts out there. The city was very responsive, came out, filled them within a week. We're already seeing the ruts come back, and the dips in the ground out there, and even with it filled in, there's water slopped everywhere. I know that we talked to water haulers and asked them, to try and control that, but I stood there and watched truck after truck just slop water all over. And I hear the complaints daily about the safety, 1 to 4 trucks lined up, and they're not just coming in from one point. They're parking mixed in with where cars and children are. That's very, very concerning. And I want to see this council address it and come up with a policy that is responsive to the possibility that we are contributing to crime outside of our borders. I want to see us address safety, and I want to see us have a plan for any kind of road repair. This money was originally earmarked for the recreation fields. We haven't even talked about how we spent last year the 2020's money on recreation and the fields, and we haven't even discussed a plan for 2021. And I think we're going to hit $500,000 in revenue from this park well, and this discussion hasn't happened. So whether it's tonight or at a later point, I think that there's a lot to discuss. And I'm getting community feedback on the daily. I tried really hard to be open-minded in the beginning, but the more that I've heard from the community and experienced myself, the more I've become very, very concerned about the park well. Sorry, I'm talking so loud. I'm trying to make sure they can hear.
Absolutely. Please. Did anyone, yeah. Sure.
Okay, I'll, number one, at this point, as one council member, I do agree that as far as regulating civility there at the park well filling station, that we ought to be monitoring that aspect of it. But I trust that staff is basically, if we're only selling to folks that are doing construction, I don't think that down the road you have a crystal ball. If somebody says they're mixing cement water or they're taking it somewhere else, I don't know how we would ever be able to figure that out. Either we sell water or we don't sell water. And I got to tell you that when I was police chief, we were dealing with folks filling up before we had these park well at some of our hydrants and just taking it illegally. So I think that the park well, and you guys chime in if I'm saying something, but the park well has provided an avenue where folks are able to legally get water that's non-potable, as opposed to having to deal with complaints of folks stealing water from hydrants and leakage in those other spots. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, that's correct. We cut off all potable water sales in June off the hydrants, including filling swimming pools as well. So we're strictly using that as a non-potable source for all the concerns and the water issues that we need, that people come in for construction, fire, and whatever else they use it for.
So that's my concern. I think if you guys come to me or come to the council and say, hey, look, I think we need to, for XYZ reasons, stop selling, etc., unless we have a cap of some sort that when we reach it, and again, I would want it to be on some sort of scientific reason or something. So again, I hope for the study that Rod is talking about that occurs, so that if that, based on a scientific rationale for why we should or shouldn't be pumping, then I would support that. But
was just the scientific aspect. I wanted to clarify the wells that went in there are specifically just to monitor drawdown caused by.
I'm talking about the study that we would do down.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to
like
get
that.
water quality data from.
Yeah, that's what I'd be looking at. So as far as damage, et cetera, now as far as, I believe that we've gotten a report on what we spent some of the money before. We bought a mower, and my idea is this is money that doesn't affect, basically it's money that goes towards recreation, that goes towards that, and it should also go back into the system, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that ultimately we're responsible to our ratepayers for what we're doing with the water funds. I'll tell you, I would also look at whether we're supplying water outside, et cetera, that whatever comes to us needs to pay for itself It's one of those, if you come to my house and ask me for a glass of water, I'll give you a glass of water. But if you come to my house and say, hey, will you help me fill my swimming pool, I think we're going to have to start talking money there. And I think that's what staff has to do is, in any sort of emergency request, et cetera, that if we're going to supply water for emergencies, I get that, and I fully support the agreement. But as far as long-term or whatever, I want to make sure that our ratepayers aren't bearing the costs so that the concerns that Bill raised or whatever are not captured there. That's my thought on that issue, is that I want to make sure that our ratepayers aren't bearing the cost for anything we do. So.
Good. Do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, first of all, I have great faith in our water department and public works. I appreciate the information that you provide. I trust you. But as a member of the public and as someone who regularly hears from members of the public, I am troubled by the jump of 3.4 acre feet in 2019 to 25 in 2020, and now even more. I think to reasonable people, it's concerning. It's a big jump and quickly. And so although, when you look at it, a percentage of what's in the aquifer, it's tiny. We're talking about less than 1%. And even as a percentage of the overall usage of water of all of our ratepayers, it's still very small. It is a troubling number, particularly in a drought year when we don't know where the water is going, and many people are worried that they're not going to have enough for basic health and safety. I would feel more comfortable if there was some sort of budget for the Parkwell water bulk sales, so that from year to year we could accept a certain amount of growth, but we wouldn't see a quintupling year to year. I don't know if that's doable. I don't know if that's something the rest of the council would feel comfortable with, but it makes sense to me that you can budget for slow, steady growth and not just give away the farm.
Yeah, so there are options. You can limit loads, you can reduce your daytime hours, you can put gaps in it. I've already talked to our programmer that built that, and he said he can adjust that to make it to whatever hours you want. If you want it to go from 7 to 4 in the morning, and then from 8 to 7 the next morning, or you can pick your, but that's a policy that council would have to make. But
Brian,
there are options.
So the city manager has mentioned that before, that we could limit the hours where trucks could come to that station, but to me that doesn't quite address the problem, because then you're just going to have even busier hours when you have that filling station open. And so it's not a question of the time period that it's open, it's a question of how many gallons we're selling.
So limiting loads is an option in a day. If you limit it and there's more demand than the limit, then they're going to get the water somewhere else. Hopefully it's not from a hydrant ceiling.
Right.
So obviously there's a demand out there, and we're providing it. And if we do cut that off, they still need that demand. So they're gonna find water somewhere.
Yeah.
One of the items that we have talked internally at our staff level is to reorient where the pickup point is on that, so it's not at the field location or that parking area. So that's an option as well. We can reduce it or manage the truck flow a little better. Those are options we have looked at. And just getting back to the financial question, I think the council knows where we are with our budgeting process with the lack of finance director and overcoming those hurdles. This is a good problem to have, that we have this funding coming in to a program or to a facility, parks, that if we are going to make any improvements, typically it's going to come out of the general fund, which is the least robust of all our accounts that we have. So that's something to note, and staff is very diligent on how we allocate and spend. We do know we put away last year's revenue, and this year's is sitting there as well. We have not talked about any comprehensive redo of parks or anything like that. We are just We want to do this systematically with a new budget, and a finance director in here, so they can start instituting new policies and programs that will carry over through numerous cycles or years.
I appreciate that, and those are great things to be thinking about, but it's hard for any of us to go to the public and ask them to conserve water when we're over here saying, come buy our water, pennies on the dime, you know, so it's...
You got two different sources.
Yeah.
Right, but in the public's mind, it's not two different sources. We have one pool of water to draw from. We have some collected surface water. We also have this groundwater that we're talking about using to supplement. And we all have a finite supply, right? It's not infinite. And so we just have to be careful of how we're utilizing it. And if we don't look to be good stewards because we're selling as much as the demand is, it's rocky ground to stand on. So, yeah.
Yeah, but there are options, you know, and if you guys, you know.
And Scott, I don't want you to think that, and my criticism of where we're at right now, that it's a criticism of your department. You're doing within what the city's asked of you thus far, you're performing. I'm stating that as a city council, I would like to see us narrow down and say this is our policy so that you have a better framework to work from to make sure that the water is in fact going to, you know, the things that we talked about that we envisioned, the construction, other types like that. I mean, we live in a small community and we don't necessarily need someone to stand there and follow the truck to know where they're going. I mean, there is some sense of common sense. When we see the truck going down this road over and over again, and there's only one thing at the end of that road, it's pretty clear what's happening. We don't need to pay somebody to do a tally. And I think it's a fair assumption that there's a fair amount of this water going to non-permitted cannabis activity outside of our city limits. I think that's a reasonable assumption.
I just want to summarize here. I mean, I want to acknowledge that this program is a victim of its own success. You know, staff when initiated this never anticipated there was going to be this need and the draw on it and the revenue that's coming in. So what these questions that the council are putting forward are basically policy questions that were not necessary when this program was initiated. So if the council will allow us some time to look at what your concerns are, put together some recommendations, and then return it to the council and start that process. I think that's one of the good things that the staff would be looking for from direction from the council on this topic.
I would like to open up to very short comments or questions from, I think John Almeida had his hand up, because we were sort of on a specific subject now that we didn't, you know, was mixed in with all sorts of other things. So if anyone wants to have a short comment, let's say 2 minutes on this.
So again, John Almeida from the Valley. I used to run the county yard here, and we had 200 miles of road that we took care of in this area. And when I'd grade a road a mile to 2 miles long in a day, it would take 6 to 7 water truck loads, max, to do that. You're seeing a lot more water being taken out of there than 6 to 7 loads, and the county's not taking it. They got their own well. So we pretty much know where most of the water is going. The majority of the water is going to these illegal dope grows, and if you're not thinking about that, you're getting a blind eye, or you're getting money hungry, or whatever it might be. But the second thing to think about is this is arsenic-laced water. And in the 2014 drought, my neighbor was buying water because his well went dry from a contractor that's using the same truck that he's going to use to mix lignite or dust off for a road. And he's bringing that, and he don't care where he gets it. He's making the money, and he's selling his domestic water. I know that's not your deal, but what happens if this arsenic water gets into this supposed to be the finest marijuana in the world, it's supposed to be from Mendocino County? And somewhere down the road, somebody gets sick from it, and their parents say, take them to the doctor, and they find out this arsenic water has been contaminated in the marijuana that the kid shouldn't have been using, but he was using. And it comes back to you guys. It's been selling this arsenic-laced water, and it's being used on illegal dope grows for a human consumptionable unit. That's something you need to think about. I can tell you that there's not that much water being used for construction compared to what the water is going out of that well. And there's an easy way to tab it, and that might be some little police work, but thing is, first thing you could have is a clipboard right there, and the person's going to put down what his business is his water company or his construction company, and he's going to put the address that load's going to, and he's going to put the purposes that it's going to. If they can't do that, something's wrong. So I think you can tag it a little bit. If they start pulling extra loads that they're not writing down, I'm sure somebody will catch them. But there's a way to work on this. It doesn't have to be that difficult. Thank you.
Ellen Drell, I want to just tag on to what John said. I'm sure that some of this water, I'm not sure, it's my opinion that probably some of this water ends up in people's drinking water as well, because you can't taste arsenic. And at those concentrations, it's dangerous. I mean, you probably don't keel over after a glass of water. But after drinking this water for weeks and months, there's probably damage that can be detected in your mental processes, for one thing. So I think, Sabrina, I'm really glad that you're bringing these issues up. I think it's an issue that we all need to struggle with, not just the city of Willits. And I think the suggestion that John made here is reasonable. Children in particular would be sensitive to drinking highly concentrated arsenic water. It makes me shudder to even think of it, that people would be using this in their households unknowingly, I'm sure mostly unknowingly. So I think it's worth struggling with. I'm aware of an ordinance at the county that requires information on every flat side of a water truck, and it includes a big phone number, and I think it even specifies the size of the lettering and the numbering so that it can be read as it drives down the road. A phone number, an address, the name of the company. And I see water trucks, most of the water trucks I see have no identifying information on them at all. So any water truck that pulls up to buy water from the city well should maybe be required to have this identification on it. And that would also help people follow up if they see trucks going into situations where they're sure it's not construction or something legitimate. It might help track some of these trucks. So I appreciate your bringing this issue up, and I think it's something that we all need to think very seriously about. Thank you.
It's a long walk. Still Fred Branson, still from up the hill. The one thing that was brought up, and you brought it up yourself, is the number of trucks moving, limit the water, put numbers and names on it, and all that's going to do is drive people to build more wells. Can you track the number of construction, of wells being constructed in the valley and up on the hill? Because people are going to still try to make money off of this stuff. If a grow is illegal, and then the arsenic that's going in, are those going into owned property or leased property? Are they damaging somebody else's property when they move out? If you're throwing well water from city well into a grow, that land is getting nailed as well. So there's ancillary issues on this one, secondary and tertiary issues around limiting the water. I'm not saying don't. I'm saying obviously that's got to be looked at for you. It impacts us up on the hill as well. But how are you going to also track the number of wells that are going to be built around that to get by that, to get that water out there? And how much is that going to impact the owners of the land when they find out the stuff's not usable in 10 years? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Hilke. I'm a Willits city resident, and I've voiced my concerns regarding what I essentially consider operating a commercial trucking operation within a city park. We can talk all we want about the park well and all the income it's bringing in, but we have to remember what that is. That is the park well because it's in a city park. That's where our children play. I have grave concerns regarding the safety of operating those trucks, which essentially fill between the dugout and the bathrooms that our kids use when they're down there playing ball. If they're in the dugout and the little boy needs to run to the restroom, he has to run around those water trucks through the line of them that are waiting. And on a typical evening, we've got 3 or 4 water trucks down there. Now, considering also with these water trucks, that, as has been mentioned before, there are a number of trucks that have literally no identification on them. I could not tell you what their license plate number is because there's no front license plate. The rear license plate is either really tiny, which is really odd, because they're not a standard size license plate, or they're non-existent, or they're totally covered with dirt so you can't read them. So I applaud anybody that's for that effort of making sure that the trucks are identifiable in some way so that the public can say, this truck was seen on this road. I've noticed a number of times trucks leaving the park well, turning and coming into the city of Willits, driving down on South Lenore, turning on East Valley, and heading out to Center Valley Road. Now, I know for a fact that Schuster's Trucking is not allowed to run their trucks down that road due to concerns of the weight on the bridge right next to Schuster's Trucking. I'm wondering why water trucks are allowed to do that, because obviously some of them are very heavy. I also have some concerns about some trucks that are being used and some trailers that are being used to haul water that I routinely see down there most evenings or most mornings that don't appear to be what I would consider a legal transportation method. These are pickups with bed tanks that haul in excess of 500 gallons. We're looking at 800-900 gallons in the bed of a pickup truck. That does not seem like that would be a safe manner, especially going up in brook trails. And you can follow these trucks, as I have, go right up Sherwood Road, spilling water on every curve, all the way to the end of brook trails, and back right up to a marijuana grow. That's in public view right there. We know where it's going. It's very obvious when they back right up to the grow. Okay, we got a number of those going on. But I'm very concerned that there's no monitoring to make sure that the trucks that are actually picking up the water are legally licensed to do so and capable to safely haul that water. When you see a 1,000-gallon tank on the bed of a flatbed trailer that is only rated for 3,500 pounds, you know they're overweight. It's pretty obvious. The tank's full, it's at 800-900 gallons, 3,500-pound axle. That's not legal. That's not safe. Our community is using these roads with the water trucks. I have heard, but I can't substantiate, that there's been 3 water truck accidents within Mendocino County this week alone. And we're only midweek. We know one, for sure, was reported with injuries up outside of Covelo. I don't imagine that that is related to the park well and water sales. But I don't know for sure where the other 2 are. But we're getting more and more reports of water truck collisions. I heard that 3 people got run off the road in Rock Tree Valley. So it is a major concern for your residents. This does not look good to us that live in the area to be dodging water trucks and seeing unsafe water trucks and knowing that the city of Willits is selling them that water. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? So I think I also, I am concerned not just with the quantity of water, but where it's going and what impact it's having. Mostly out of the, that impact is outside the city limits, but if we're supplying the water, I would like to make sure that
not only are the trucks legal and safe on the road, and that they're not impacting the use of our recreational facilities in a manner that's unsafe at our park, but that they're also, I liked John Almeida's suggestion that we require them to list where the water is going. And I'm not sure I understood you, Scott, earlier that you were saying the trucking companies have to be licensed to have the pass code or whatever it is to go in and get any water. But I'm not sure, what I heard earlier, like a month or two ago, was that there's no way to enforce or know where they're taking that water, or whether the recipients of that water know for sure that it's not potable and that it has arsenic in it. So how to enforce a reasonable, what's the word, some kind of regulatory framework, I don't know how to enforce it. I don't know what's reasonable, but I'm not real comfortable with the water being used for potentially illegal grows and impacting our city roads, county roads, property, as this gentleman pointed out, that the properties where it's being taken may be affecting future owners and so forth. I mean, it does have ramifications, and I would like to get a handle on that. I'm not quite sure how the city can set up such a framework, but I'm not real comfortable with everybody who drives up and has the pass lane has unlimited use of it, and we don't know where it's going. I'm not real comfortable with that. Yeah, Jerry.
Madge, I think Brian had talked about staff bringing something back, and with that, I would also like you guys to take advantage of city attorney time to figure out where we sit with that, and when you bring it back to us at a later date so that we have a better idea as far as what you can or can't enforce and what you can't. I mean, I honestly see it more as we're either going to sell X amount of water and that's it, and then also police where we're losing water too. Obviously we lose it by leaks, but like I said, I remember before I retired that we did have a lot of water thefts in some of our outlying areas. And so I don't hear that as much anymore because I think people are buying water here or wherever. Maybe there's still thefts and maybe you could leverage on that, but I would welcome staff bringing something back to us as far as mitigation at the ball fields or other plans. You know, I figure you guys are the experts. You guys could look at it and figure out what works best. That's all I gotta say.
I know that we raised this at the city council at least a month ago, and we wanted to get those monitoring wells in to, make sure that we have data, and that's a step forward. We have some data now, but I think as the season progresses into the fall and these rates of water use there, I don't want it to take too long, and I understand it's another task for staff, but I like Jerry's suggestion that staff come back to us relatively soon with some kind of option. What do we have options, and what would they be? And one of them would be just some kind of limit the hours of operation, or there's options that don't involve enforcement. But I kind of like John Almeida's suggestion about them having to indicate where they're going with the water.
My vision would be that we give clear direction to the city manager about what parameters we see. And if it's getting late tonight, we don't want to have that discussion, that's fine, but we need to have a discussion like what parts of this, what's acceptable, what's not. We give clear direction to him, puts forth a policy that's been vetted through legal and staff and so forth. And then these current permit holders are given, for example, 30 days, 60 days, whatever seems reasonable to conform to new, whatever this new ordinance or policy is. And if the policy says, for example, that you have to sign this contract that says that you'll agree to have your vehicle marked and you'll only go to the park between these hours, and maybe it even says something like, this is my suggestion, that you have to provide logs about where your water distribution is. That's just an example, but we put these parameters together, and then you give them proper notice. I mean, I didn't expect things to change in a day, but we do need to start thinking about this, especially considering, the rate at which we're selling, and I don't think, we could be sitting here in 2022 and be looking at the number and be like, well, we gotta address it, even if we don't get it dealt with before the end of this year, 2021. We need to have something in place for 2022 because water issues are not going away. That would be my hope.
So I guess what I would like to know from staff and maybe from Brian is having, and Scott, having a couple of, having you supply us with sort of what you think the options could be, or do you want us to have an ad hoc committee of the council to work with you to give guidance about what we want? Or, because I think what we want is clear yet.
Today is September 1st. As you recall, the second meeting of the month has been pushed back an extra week. I think we can put together preliminary findings and some proposal concepts for you to consider at that meeting on the 29th.
That would meet my expectations, and I appreciate that. But I do want to note that I don't want this to feel like any particular staff's project, and that you need to any staff member needs to set the parameters, because the pushback, if there's pushback from the water haulers, shouldn't come to you. It should come to council if we're the one that's giving direction and making the decisions. So I'm a little concerned about saying, Scott, go come up with this, and then we'll see if we like it or not. I really think that if we're the ones that are pushing this change in policy, that we should be saying, these are the changes we want. Go figure out if this is possible, and then bring it back to us in a formalized plan. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we do. I mean, ultimately, we're going to advise and offer suggestions. You as the elected officials will decide on the policy and enact it. So, I mean, then at that time, the public, if the haulers want to engage with the council and say, here's how they manage it, here's their concerns, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So, Larry, do you want to weigh in at all? No, you don't.
I said my spiel.
What?
I said in my spiel.
You okay?
At first of it.
Anything about the park well? Anything about the park well, Larry?
No, the park well is a mess. And we've let it get to be a mess, and nobody has cleaned it up. And so, the city is the one that's responsible for the park well and all the grounds and everything the way it is. And we should have been there a long time ago, because this trucks haven't just started this last month. They've been coming for a long time, and you talk to the people out in the valley, and these same trucks come 6 times to a place a day. I mean, it's not just something that is happening periodically, but it's happening every day, I sit out in front of my store, and there's a truck going down the highway every day, every 2 or 3 minutes apart. Some days it's 5 minutes apart. But there's a lot of water being hauled out of here.
So you did have something to say. Thank you. I think I wanted to make sure that if we're hoping that staff can come back to us with some kind of parameters or options, that you have at least heard from all 5 of us that we do have concerns. And we're not sure what the solutions are, but if you need more guidance from the council level, we can have an ad hoc committee to work with you. But I think I like your suggestion to bring something back to us on September 29th.
It might be a moving target. We'll present, we'll get your comments, we may do adjustments.
Okay.
I mean, this is uncharted territory a little bit. We have to be creative thinkers. everything you identified, there's concerns, but some of the concerns on how do we mitigate or manage, it's outside our jurisdiction. So how do we, if we're going to continue providing that resource, how do we manage that within the bounds of our jurisdiction? Or is it just to reduce it, like Scott was saying, the volume and the capacity, and reduce that, the impact on the community? These are options we'll look at. We'll draw them out, present them, and hopefully get some big comments in return.
And although I don't like the idea of just putting it somewhere else so it's not as visible, but not next to the park. But not next to the park might be an important factor, and I wonder if that's a huge expensive thing, or, you know, if that's one of the options is to not have it at that location. What do we, is that?
That is an option, as I said, we have looked at internally. It could be done if we didn't run the numbers, but, you know, that's something, you know.
I mean, we don't.
Once again, we'll produce this itemized list and for your review.
And, you know, and I think all five of us are very mindful of, we don't want to put more work on your plate. You've got a lot going on, but I think the concern is enough that it certainly warrants some look and some, you know, serious decision-making on our part as council.
Number one concern for me, and I would hope that we get addressed first, would be just safety of the area as the first concern. I'm kind of waiting to make the area safer for the activity in the area, whether that means closing off one entrance and only trucks enter, because there's 2 entry points there. Only trucks can only enter on one side, and you just place some temporary barriers. And then only families can enter on the other side. There's already a porta potty there. Most people are using that right now. And we could make some signs that that restroom is closed, use this alternative one. That would be a temporary solution. But right now, what's going on, it's an accident waiting to happen.
I just wanted to add one last thing, that whatever you guys do, that you involve the fire department so that in the event we end up in a situation where we were last year where they're having to come in and fill, that they have the ability. I mean, I think public safety as a whole has to be looked at, and obviously the safety there with the kids is important, but if we're in a fire bad situation, that even if we leave something capped that can be used later on, I would be interested in keeping that so that you have the option to say, tell you what, there's no football, baseball games happening right now. We've got a fire issue and we need to get trucks in orderly, or as many as we can, and use that fill station or that ability to fill there, then I would want that available.
Probably the quickest solution we've talked about would be if we could work with the Frontier Days, at least the old Little League field, would be to possibly use that and hard pipe it off of the existing fill station, which they would just have to walk over, punch their code in, but they wouldn't be in the same lot. They'd be coming in on the old Little League field through that fence, and there's plenty of room in there.
If that was a possibility, that would be a fantastic possibility.
And we thought about it. I just don't know what we have in the contract with the Frontier Days, so they do lease it from us. But yeah, that was one of our first needs. Yeah. So we have been thinking, and trust me, the kids absolutely are number one priority. We have put a sign up, and when I see a truck driver says soccer season starting up, Little League season starting up, I do remind them to be vigilant as well. But a long-term solution would be to move it from that location, and we're talking about it. Or short-term. Long-term, short-term, I guess is what I should say.
Okay.
Whatever comes fast.
So that some look at that could happen even before our meeting on the 29th, if it's feasible.
What was that?
I'm just saying that might even, some improvements there could potentially happen even before it's brought back on September 29th. Is that possible or not?
Anything's possible. We just have to prioritize.
Okay. Let's just say it's easier to gather staff and put ideas down on the paper than actually moving infrastructure at this time. So Give us some time to get our thoughts together and return the material to the council.
Okay.
But we'll pass the concerns along that we heard regarding safety and potential, measures to reduce conflict to the homeowners out there, and maybe we can do some temporary measures out there for the next couple of weeks.
That's what I was thinking, if it's feasible, that would be cool. Okay, I think we are ready to adjourn this meeting. Okay, so I'm adjourning this meeting at 8:35. Thank you to those who, for everybody.